My dear brothers and sisters, Yali Mudad.
برادران و خواهران عزیزم یا علی مدد. امروز میخواهم در مورد سلامت روانیمان صحبت کنم. انزوای اجتماعی که توسط این بیماری همگیر ایجاد شده است مسائل مربوط به سلامت روانی را افزایش داده است. سلامت روانی مشخص میکند که ما چه احساس نسبت به سلامت خود و اطرافیان نزدیکمان داشته باشیم. اگر یک بخشی از وجود ما که لازم است بسیار متوجه آن باشیم، آن سلامت مغز ما است. همان طور که سلامت مغز ما در نوسان است، سلامت روان ما نیز متغیر است. وقتی از نظر جسمی احساس ناخوشی می کنیم به پزشک مراجعه می کنیم. به همین ترتیب ما باید متوجه سلامت ذهنی خود باشیم. دوره های وجود دارد که احساس می کنیم با قوت هستیم و دوره هایی هم هست که از نظر احساسی حال خوبی نداریم. در این چنین لحظاتی باید به دنبال مراقبت های مناسب باشیم، همانطور که در امور جسمی خود توجه داریم، چون هیچ تفاوت بین این دو وجود ندارد. حالت روحی سالم چیست؟ یک مورد آگاهی است. آگاهی از محیط بیرونی و مسائل درونی که احساس ما را نسبت به خود ما شکل می‌دهد. هنگامی که ما سالم هستیم در برابر قیاس‌های نادرست یا نگرانی نسبت به اتفاقاتی که از عهده ما خارج است، مقاومت می‌کنیم. ما اینجا و اکنون حضور داریم، در صلح و آرامش با خود، با دیگران و شرایطمان، و در صورت لزوم به دنبال کمک هستیم. مانع اصلی کمک خواستن افراد در صورت مشکل، شرم کردن و یا ننگ کردن از اظهار مشکل روانی است. این ننگ و شرم ریشه در فرهنگ، تاریخ، جامعه یا باورهای دوستان و خانواده دارد. شرم و ننگ باعث می شود افرادی که از نظر روانی حالت خوبی ندارند فکر کنند که به نوعی ناقص هستند، لایق کمک نیستند یا در برابر مشکلی که با آن روبروند ساکت باشند. اجازه دهید سریع بگویم این شرم و ننگ بی اساس و زیانبار است. از هر 5 کانادایی 1 نفر بیماری روانی را تجربه می کند. این نگرانی ها بخشی از شرایط بشر است. همان قدر معمول است که مریضی جسمانی. آنچه عزیزان ما در هنگام این نوع مشکلات نیاز دارند درک حمایت و توجه حرفه‌ای است. در سالهای اخیر بسیاری از مدیران عامل، سیاستمداران، ورزشکاران و شخصیت‌های معروف با صراحت در مورد اهمیت درمان و مشاوره در رابطه با عملکردشان صحبت کردند. آنها تشخیص دادند که یک ذهن سالم برای عملکرد درست و موفقیت بسیار مهم است و فعالانه متوجه سلامت روانیشان هستند. اعضای خانواده نقش مهمی در حمایت سلامت روانی دارند. مسائل سلامت روانی می تواند پیچیده باشد و گاهی می تواند بسیار آسیب پذیر باشد. بر طیف وسیعی از جوانانی که در رسانه‌های اجتماعی فعالند تا متخصصانی که تحت فشارهای شغلی‌اند تأثیر می‌گذارد. اعضای خانواده باید هوشیار و مواظب باشند. من از شما می‌خواهم که با عزیزان خود آزادانه صحبت کنید. اگر ما با اعضای خانواده‌هایمان که دچار استرس ذهنی اند مهربان نباشیم، آنها به چه کسی اعتماد کنند؟ از دیدگاه آنها به مسائل نگاه کنید تا به بهترین نتیجه ممکن برسید. برای خانواده‌ها خیلی مهم است که مقاومت یا تاب‌آوری ایجاد کنند. این یعنی چی؟ این به این معنی است که در امور علایم بیماری، شرایط، منابع اجتماعی، ذهنیت باز و اطمینان از این که شرم و ننگ را در این زمینه کنار گذاشت آموزش داده شود. کورس‌های کوتاه مدتی بسیاری به صورت آنلاین وجود دارد. به طور مثال کمک‌های اولیه روانشناسی، زندگی مطلوب، رفتار درمانی و پیوندهای خانواده. ما در کشور زندگی می‌کنیم که منابع فوق‌العاده‌ای دارد. پس از آن استفاده کنید. می‌خواهم 4 نوع کمک یا حمایت را لیست کنم که در دسترس همه جماعت قرار دارد. اول، به دستور مولانا حاضر امام همه مکی کامریاها و مکیانی کامریانی در کانادا کورس کمک‌های اولیه سلامت روانی را گذراندند. بنابراین هر یکی از ما اولین نقطه تماس را داریم. به موکی کامریاها مراجعه کنیم، زیرا اگر ما برای پیدا کردن سیستم بهداشت و یا منابع ضروری مشکل داریم، آنها می توانند ما را به متخصصان متصل کنند. دوم، مؤسسات مشاورانی دارند که می توانند در تهیه و معرفی خدمات به ما کمک کنند. برای دسترسی به آن به کنسول محلتان مراجعه کنید. سوم، دکتر خانوادگی ما می تواند ما را راهنمایی کند اگر مطمئن نیستیم که چگونه خدمات لازم را دریافت کنیم یا اینکه چه خدماتی برای ما مناسب است. آیا ما به روانپزشک، روانشناس، مشاور ازدواج یا مشاور زندگی مراجعه کنیم؟ چهارم، ممکن است مراقبت‌های درمانی را که دریافت می‌کنیم ضرورت به ارزیابی داشته باشد. اگر با آن راحت نیستیم، ما باید به دنبال گزینه دوم یا حتی سوم باشیم. نهایتاً اهمیت دین و ایمان را به یاد داشته باشید و بدانید که ما تنها نیستیم. بدانید که در همه اوقات هنگامی که تاریکی‌های تنهایی را در اطرافمان احساس می‌کنیم، خدا هست. مطمئن باشید که نور او در اطراف ما است. او ما را درک می‌کند، ما را دوست دارد و در هر مرحله از زندگی با ما است. همانطور که قرآن کریم می‌فرماید: و ما انسان را آفریده ایم و می‌دانیم که نفس او چه وسوسه‌ای به او می‌کند. من شما را تشویق می‌کنم که این را به یاد داشته باشید. اعضای جماعت، بسیاری از شما پرسیده اید که چگونه می‌توانید به جماعتی که با اوجگیری بحران بهداشتی در هند و سایر کشورها کمک مالی کنید. شما می‌توانید این کار را از طریق بنیاد آقاخان، صندوق همگیری یا پندمیک فند انجام دهید. تشکر از توجه شما و خدا حافظ.
تشکر از شما رئیس صاحب قاسم لکا برای این پیام مهم. اسم من ایلیا نورانی هست و به برنامه بازتاب جمعه شب امشب خوش آمدید. همانطور که می توانید بگویید برنامه این هفته کمی متفاوت است. امشب ما هفته صحت روانی را که تا یک شنبه 9 می ادامه دارد به رسمیت می شناسیم. امسال موضوع هفته صحت روانی این است که به آن توجه داشته باش اما آن را دست کم نگیر. همه کانادایی ها را تشویق می کنیم که از احساساتمان پرده برداریم و ابراز کرده و زبانی را یاد بگیریم تا بتوانیم احساساتمان را بیان کنیم. تحقیقات نشان می دهد که صرفاً با صحبت کردن و یا نوشتن درباره چگونگی احساس ما می توانیم نه تنها صحت روانی خود بلکه صحت جسمانی خود را نیز بهبود بخشیم. در برنامه امشب بازتاب جمعه شب ما در مورد اهمیت گفتگو، گسترش برای بهبود صحت روانی و در نتیجه ما در مورد مسائل صحبت خواهیم کرد که می توانند ناراحت کننده باشند. از جمله انواع مختلف بیماری های روانی مثل خودکشی و غیره. با روشن کردن این موضوعات دشوار ما امیدواریم که برنامه ما بتواند به جماعت ما کمک کند تا گفتگو و محاوره را آغاز کنند. اما اگر خودتان با این مسائل فعلا مبارزه می کنید، این قسمت ممکن است برنامه درست برای شما نباشد یا شاید بخواهید با کسی که دوستش دارید یا کسی که بالایش اعتماد دارید تماشا کنید. و اگر احساس کردید که به فردی نیاز دارید که با او صحبت کنید، از طریق خط دسترسی با رهبری جماعت تماس بگیرید، شخصی که بتوانید به او اعتماد کنید یا به خدمات کمکی محلی زنگ بزنید، زیرا شما در صحبت کردن در مورد آن تنها نیستید و این واقعاً برای شما کمک خواهد کرد. در جامعه تا حد زیاد و در میان جماعت ما صحبت کردن در مورد این موضوعات بسیار تابو و یا ممنوع به حساب می آید. ما نباید اشتباهاتمان یا آسیب پذیری های خود را افشا کنیم یا به مردم بگوییم که ما واقعاً چه حس داریم وقتی از ما می پرسند که چطور هستی. متاسفانه در جامعه امروز رسانه های اجتماعی پست ها و تصحیح عکس ها و این شخص چی کار را انجام می دهد و آن شخص چی کار را به دست آورد و این شخص کدام موتر را دارد. برای هر یک از ما آسان است که احساس کنیم که ما به صورت جداگانه از دیگران عقب مانده ایم و دیگران از ما جلو رفتند. و به اهدافی که همسن و سالان ما رسیدن ما نرسیده ایم. چی از لحاظ وظیفه باشد، چی از لحاظ روابط. در حالی که از نظر فکری به راحتی می توان گفت که زندگی هیچ کس کامل و تکمیل نیست. مواجه شدن با رسانه‌های سرپرستی شده و گردش اطلاعات گمراه کننده یا نادرست می تواند نقش عمیقی در جهانبینی هر کس ایفا کند. آسیب پذیری بیماری‌های روانی چیز است که شخصاً برای من اهمیت خاص دارد. وقتی 25 سالم بودم، از نظر ظاهری زندگیم کامل بود. پدر و مادرم موکی و کامریا صاحبان جماعتخانه فرانکلین در کلگری به مدت 4 سال بودند. من معاون ارشد رضاکاران با IVC در پراریریز بودم. من تحصیلات عالی خود را در رشته تجارت 1 سال قبل تمام کردم و در یک شرکت فورچون 500 مشغول به کار بودم. من 6 روز در هفته کار می کردم، غذاهای سالم می خوردم و از حمایت خوب خانواده، دوستان و نامزدم برخوردار بودم. اما با وجود این موفقیت ها دنیای من هنوز تاریک بود. من احساس افسردگی و در نهایت افکار خودکشی در سر داشتم. یک حادثه که هنوز هم خام است. من تلاش کردم که زندگیم را بگیرم و سپس در شفاخانه بستر شدم. این هنوز برای من آسان نیست که در مورد آن صحبت کنم و هر روز سپاسگزارم که ناموفق بودم. پس از بهبود یافتن در شفاخانه و با ادامه تداوی و گرفتن دواها بهتر شدم و در حالی که هر نوع بیماری می تواند بر هر یک از ما تأثیر بگذارد، من از این تجربه اهمیت مراقبت از صحت روانی خود را به همان قدرت و نظمی که مراقب از صحت و سلامتی جسمیم هستم آموختم. امشب ما از یک متخصص در این زمینه میشنویم. دکتر سایرا سبزلی ما را در مورد صحت روانی، بیماری های روانی و اینکه چگونه هر یک از ما می توانیم از طریق شفقت و سخاوت از یکدیگر محافظت کنیم آگاه می کند و روشن می کند. پس از آن من در یک گفتگو با دکتر سایرا برای درک این که یک فرد مبتلا به بیماری روانی چه کار می کند تا احساس بهتر داشته باشد و هر یک از ما می توانیم برای کمک به یکدیگر چه کار را انجام دهیم. در این برنامه ما را به بخش‌های کوتاه معرفی برای تقویت پیام‌های ارائه شده توسط دکتر سایرا و از طریق این برنامه ما امیدواریم که جماعت ما بتوانند چیزی یاد بگیرند. آنچه را یاد میگیرند با خود ببرند و حتی اگر کمی متفاوت است. ما همچون برنامه‌های قبلی از عبارات موسیقی برای بلند بردن روحیه شما برنامه را به پایان خواهیم رسانید. پس بیایید برنامه را آغاز کنیم. دکتر سایرا دارای دکترای روانشناسی است. او مشاور تایید شده روانشناسی کانادا است. در طول 2 دهه تجربه کاری در این عرصه، دکتر سایرا با مردان و زنان در زمینه‌های مختلف کمک کرده است تا پاسخ سوالات مربوط به کار، زندگی، عشق و معنا پیدا کنند. او متخصص در ارائه خدمات به مشتریان است که آماده تغییر هستند و همچنین می‌خواهند ارزش‌های فرهنگی و باورهای معنوی خود را در درمان قرار دهند. لطفاً دکتر سایرا سبزلی را خوش آمدید بگویید.
Yalimadet, it's Dr. Saira, and it is my pleasure and my honor to be with you here today on Friday Night Reflections. So what are we talking about today? Something that's a bit difficult to talk about. Something that takes a lot of courage to talk about. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about mental illness. We're talking about the suffering and the struggling of people who are very close to us, or maybe our own suffering and struggling. And so I invite you, as we're having this conversation, to be brave, to be courageous, to let yourself think about things that maybe you haven't thought about before. And here's a tip. Did you know that emotion can only last inside the body 60 to 90 seconds, unless you add extra thoughts. So if you're able to sit in uncomfortable emotion for 60 to 90 seconds, it will pass, right? If we resist and we push back and we try to avoid, well, all kinds of things happen because our emotions are designed to be expressed and released and let go. And so if you're feeling some emotion coming up as we're talking together, that's okay. You're human. And eventually all of us will feel this emotion because this topic is very close to our heart, right? But be brave. Be brave with me for the next little while as we explore this territory of mental health. And so what is mental health? Well, mental health is something we all have. Just like we all have physical health, we all have mental health. Mental health is not mental illness. So mental illness is a diagnosed condition. 1 in 5 Canadians have a mental illness. But all of us have mental health. Some days our mental health is better, some days not so good, but we all have it. I want to talk to you about the mental health continuum. So this is a model that was developed by the Mental Health Commission of Canada. And what it shows us is that it's not just about being well or unwell, there's actually a continuum. And so some days are green days. And a green day is a day where you feel good and you feel alive and you feel vibrant and you feel like, you could do anything. You feel energized and optimistic. Things are going well. And we've all had green days. But not every day is a green day. Not even for the best of us, right? Often we'll have a different kind of a day. And so another kind of a day is a yellow day. So green, yellow, orange, red, the continuum. And so a yellow day is a day where you're just kind of feeling not yourself. You're feeling a little bit under the weather, a little irritable. Things are getting to you that usually don't bother you. You maybe feel a bit like tired and you just want to get the day over with. And you just kind of that feeling. That's a yellow day. Then there's the orange day. So if we're looking, green, yellow, orange. Orange is the day where now things are getting pretty bad. You're starting to procrastinate. You're having some trouble sleeping, or you're sleeping too much. You're noticing changes in your diet, or the things that you usually do for your self-care, you've stopped doing. The other things that can happen in orange is you're getting really angry and irritable with everybody around you. You're snapping at people. And you're just not like, you're not in crisis yet, but you're pretty close to crisis. We call that burnout. Orange is where we have burnout. And then there's the red zone. So red is where now you're in crisis. You're going to need professional intervention to get you back to where you need to be. You're raging, or you're crying uncontrollably, or your anxiety is so high that you can't even function. You can't sleep. You have headaches. You have body pains that you can't explain. Just everything is just awful. That's the red zone. So the reason I want to tell you about these different zones is because we can watch and monitor ourselves to see where are we in the zone. Is it a green day or is it a yellow day? Is it an orange day? If we're having too many orange days in a row, well, we need to reach out and get some support, because if we don't, guess where we're headed? We're headed to the red. The neat thing about the continuum as well is that not only can we look out for our own selves and kind of monitor our own selves, we can actually look out for each other. So the other people in your life, the others around you, you can look at them and say, she looks like she's in yellow. Oh, a month later, she's in orange. I need to do something. And you can actually do something early days in the yellow zone. We can reach out to each other and have genuine conversations about how we actually feel. Right? Not just, how are you? Good. How are you? Yali molali. But actual, meaningful, connected heart-to-heart conversations. Let's do that for each other. Let's help each other. Because when you're suffering, when you're struggling, when you're the one who's stuck, it's hard to know what to do about that. It's hard to know where to go with that. Or, like, what happens now? Who do I turn to? What's even happening to me? It's hard to know. And so if there's people around you who are watching, who are observing and noticing way before you get to the red, then you can get the help that you need faster. And then you're not in crisis. You're just not in crisis. Now, in order for us to be able to reach out to each other, we also have to be willing to be there for each other. How do we show up for each other? How do we actually show up for each other? Well, one of the first things is that we have to challenge our tendency, and this is just the way our brain works, to judge other people. To look at ourselves and look at them and put them either higher than us. Wow, they're doing so much. How, I could never be like that. Or put them lower than us. Oh, why are they engaging in that behavior? We have to learn to see people as the same as us. Two souls, children of God, brothers and sisters on the same level. We have to learn to do that with each other. Because when people feel like they may be judged, they're not going to ask for help. Did you know that 2 out of 3 people who live with a mental illness do not ask for help because of the stigma associated with getting help? 2 out of 3. That's unacceptable. Unacceptable, especially in a community like ours where there are supports available. There's so many people willing to help when people step forward. But if people feel like they're going to be judged, they won't step forward. So we need to watch what we say in our day-to-day lives and how we approach each other, how we judge each other, or how we be compassionate with each other. Just be compassionate with each other. I want to talk to you about 5 pillars that you want to look for in yourself or others to know if maybe you're going down the slippery slope of depression. So why is everyone talking about depression? I'll tell you why. Because depression, untreated, can lead to suicide. I'm going to say that again. Depression, untreated, can lead to death. Just like a heart condition, untreated, can lead to death. Think about that for a moment. If somebody had a heart condition and they had to take certain medications, or they had to, see certain specialists, or they had to do certain things, or they had to walk a certain time and they had to eat, we would fully support them in supporting their heart and making sure their heart stays strong and healthy, because their heart is pumping blood throughout their whole body. You can't live without a heart, right? We fully support them. But if somebody has a mental illness, somebody's brain is not functioning the way they need it to be, then we treat them a little bit differently, don't we? But remember, the heart is an organ and the brain is an organ. It's a part of the body. There's an imbalance. There's some treatment that is needed. If somebody was missing a limb due to an accident, we would be generous with that person. We wouldn't expect them to do things that they used to be able to do until they adapt to this new change in their body. The same is true with depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, all these different illnesses that people can experience. Give them a little bit of time to adjust and figure out how to be with this new brain. Just give them a little bit of time. I have depression. And I guess I thought somehow it wouldn't happen to me, but it did. And when it did, it was a valley of despair that I don't wish on anybody. And here's what I learned for those of you who are in the valley right now and listening. Here's what I learned about the valley. There's no light there. And the goal is not to look for the light in the valley. The goal is to teach yourself how to see in the darkness. To teach yourself how to see by moonlight and trust that you are strong enough and supported enough to walk through this valley. You'll not know if you're supported unless you reach out and ask for help. And I know how difficult that is. Trust me, I know how difficult that is. Especially for those people who don't show outwardly the signs, right? And so what are the signs? What are the signs? What can you look for in your loved ones to actually be there for them in a meaningful way, to help them navigate? So there's 5, specifically for depression, there's 5 pillars that we want to think about. So there's food. What are you eating? Movement. Self-explanatory. Sleep. Are you sleeping too much, sleeping too little, or not having a restful sleep, not feeling rested when you wake up in the morning. Hygiene. A lot of people, when they experience depression or high levels of anxiety, find it hard to do the basics of hygiene. So whether that's showering or whether that's wearing clothes that, for me it was blow drying my hair, or even getting in the shower. It was so difficult when I was struggling. So hygiene is another thing to look for. And the fifth thing that happens when people are depressed is that they don't maintain their social support. And so when I'm working with clients who are depressed, we keep an eye on these 5 areas. We tell them that, okay, keep an eye on these. And then I ask them to tell their family and friends that, hey, can you help me monitor this? Because you won't always see it. You won't always see what you're going through when you're the one in it, right? You don't see it. So those are the 5 pillars. And I think they're really important for us to kind of really internalize. So the things you put in your mouth. So are you eating right for your brain, the things that your brain really needs? Are you moving? And movement can be, honestly, 20 jumping jacks in between meetings at your desk. It doesn't have to be fancy, right? Movement can be running up and down the stairs of your house on your lunch break. Movement can be putting on some music and just moving around the room. It doesn't have to be fancy, but making sure you're moving. Hygiene and social support. So those 5, keep an eye. I want to talk lastly about stigma. And so I mentioned that people do not seek help. And here's the thing to know. Stigma can be more debilitating sometimes than the mental illness itself. So if we look at things like addiction, how much stigma do we have in our Jamaat around addiction? It's a mental illness. It's a mental illness. There's actually a condition in the brain that prevents healing unless the person gets appropriate treatments. How much stigma do we have around eating disorders, right? What are our judgments there? What about schizophrenia or anxiety or depression or suicide? What are our judgments? What do we tell ourselves and other people about those people who are just suffering? It's not okay. And we need to change. We need to be brave. We need to try a different way. Because it's you and me that are going to help the people who are struggling. And if you're someone who's struggling, you can count on me. And you can count on the people in your life if you tell them. And if they don't get it, tell someone else. And if they don't get it, tell someone else. And keep telling people until somebody gets it. Because there is help available and you don't need to suffer like this. When people end their life by suicide, it's often because they want the pain to end. Not necessarily they want their life to end, they just want the pain to end, and there's no other way they can see for that to happen. And so if the rest of us can help be that safety net, the rest of us can help hold those of us who are not well, what a gift. One last thought. Orchids and dandelions. There's a book, Orchids and Dandelions, and it talks about parenting and how to parent. I'm going to use those ideas now to talk about us as adults. Some of us are dandelions. And so dandelions are people who, you can step on a dandelion and it springs right back up. You can cut it and it grows again. It has a strong root, it's a hardy plant, right? For those of you who are weeding your gardens right now, you know what I'm talking about. Those dandelions, they are tough. You can't really get rid of them. You can't really knock them down. They keep coming back up. And then there are orchids. Orchids need a particular tender, gentle support. If you mistreat an orchid, even moving it sometimes from one side of the room to the other side of the room can kill the orchid. Even just moving the pot. I learned that the hard way, right? And so orchids need a lot more care, a lot more tenderness, a lot more attention. And so you cannot treat an orchid like a dandelion. And here's the thing. You might assume you're talking to a dandelion because they look tough and they look like they can handle anything, but really they're an orchid. They're just wearing a mask. And so what if we all treated each other like orchids, with tenderness, with gentleness, assuming that we can help, we can be there, we can support people. Because somebody doesn't have to have a mental illness to get help from you, right? I mean, your heart is big and we're one Jamaat, and we've talked about how we're one Jamaat. And so in this one Jamaat, as we support each other, brother to brother, sister to sister, brothers and sisters together, let's not let anyone fall through our safety net that we build together as one Jamaat.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saira. Some of the resources and some of the things you talked about, super, super insightful. And, I wish when I was going through my personal lived experience, I wish I had known some of these things. And, it happened to me 3 years ago where my blanket of darkness had come over, and it just brings you back to a time where you could have so many people around you, so many people who love you, and had a great job. I was so involved in Kane. I was vice major for IVC for the Prairies. Like, wow, like great seva. Again, amazing job, great friends, family. I had it all, and I still felt I was just nothing. That nobody was gonna understand me. I felt I just really just had failed, like at life. And so when I went through what I went through, it's, I got institutionalized. I was on medication, took therapy, and I'm glad I got the help I needed. But there's so much stigma around that. And whether it's in our community, outside our community, at school, at work, what are some of the things that I could tell, my 25-year-old self or my 18-year-old self, or you're 35, 45, 55, about that stigma and people talking, and what do you do about that? Because you really feel like you're the only one and you don't think anyone's going to understand you, and it gets worse.
That is a profound question. It's a profound question, because what you're saying is that even though everything around you seemed fine on the surface, inside you were suffering so deeply. And your question is like, what does somebody do with that? So with the stigma piece, we can't control what other people say about us, right? Like we can't. Even on a good day, right? We can't control what other people say. And so for those who are struggling, what I would say is, despite whatever anybody else might say, find one person. Just one person that you feel like you can confide to about what you're going through. And they may understand, they may not understand, but the point is you've said it out loud to someone, right? And that person could be a friend, a family member, a colleague. It could be somebody in the Jamaat. It could even be someone on the other end of a distress center phone line, right? Anybody, tell someone. I would say also that if you can find someone in your family, whether that's your nuclear family, your extended family, somebody who can just hold it for you, right? Somebody who can hold it for you. When I was in my deep, dark, awful place, I remember calling up my cousin and I said, I feel like there's this red balloon and I'm in a storm and I'm holding this balloon and it's like, it's in the wind and I can't hold on anymore. It's too hard. And she said to me, well, let's give that balloon a few more strings. And she said, I'll hold a string for you, right? And then she said, I want you to call 10 people this week and find out who's going to hold a string for you. And I did. And that changed the game for me, right? Because I knew that if I couldn't hold on, well, there were people holding on for me. And so that's what I would say is like, remember, there's people willing to hold your balloon. You don't have to be the only one. You can ask, just ask.
And that's so profound. And even from that, how you shared, it's like I remember when my psychiatrist at the hospital, she's like, depression is like a hat, Ali, and you're just wearing it right now, and some days you'll take it off and some days you'll put it on. It's like I thought I was the only one, and I wish I would have told more people during that time, or not to like publicize it or on that. It's like there's so many people who go through the exact same thing, and it's like maybe if we would have talked to more people, it wouldn't have been so bad and scary. Like, again, I bring up being so lonely, and it's like I had done everything correctly. And I want to ask you as well, Dr. Saira, like you could do everything correctly. You could have this checklist and have it all figured out. And it's like, why me? Like I go Kane, I do all these things. It's like, why is this, happening to me? Like I didn't do anything wrong. So I guess with my, like another question I have for you, like, talking to a therapist and medication and, different resources when I want to go over, but what are some of the professional resources that people could use? But also, I think for me, I really did like some of the ones that weren't like professional, quote unquote, like talking to people or, so could you share some of those with me? Because I think sometimes for me, it's like, it just seems so academic. I'm like, I don't want to call a number, or I don't know what medications are, and I don't even know what I'm going through. And it's like, that all just seems like school and homework. Like, what are some of just the other resources, like professionally and also like a little bit maybe not so professional?
So you said about, what's happening to me. I don't know what's happening to me. What's wrong with me was how you were feeling. And here's the thing that we forget, right? Is that mental health is something we all have. Just like physical health is something we all have. And if somebody had, an injury where they lost a limb, right? People would say, oh, okay, your life has got to shift a little bit to accommodate that injury. And remember that the brain is an organ, right? So if you could see it that way, that this is an injury of the thinking processes in the brain, right? There's actually chemical imbalance. That's why medication can help some people, because there's a chemical imbalance in the brain. And so the problem is we think we are our brain, right? So if my leg was broken, I wouldn't say like, oh, I'm a terrible person and what's wrong with me? I would say, okay, my leg, a part of my body, is needing to heal. In the same way, my brain, a part of my body, is needing to heal. It's just so critical. And we don't see it that way. We see it as like your personality, something's wrong with you, you're weak, or something it's just untrue, right? So that's the first thing I would say is like, what's wrong with you? Really nothing. There's an organ in your body that needs a little bit of extra support, and there's treatment for that. That's the first thing I would say. As far as the resources, the kind of, there's the professional resources. So if somebody is feeling like, not well and they're worried and they're not quite sure, and it's just been going on too long and you can't kind of pop out of it, what is happening to me? Talk to your family doctor. Your family doctor can give you, you walk in, you tell them, they'll give you a checklist and something to look at right away, and you can have a conversation with them right there, and they can help you through that. Like it's, doctors know about how to support you through this. That's kind of the professional route. But there's so much, like we know that recovery from mental health challenges is so much more long lasting when people have social support. We know this in the research, right? And so as far as the non-professional resources, there are, the friends, and you might be surprised at the friends that actually do show up for you at this time, because you may not know that they have the same story, right? Because we're all kind of not talking about it, but when you start to talk about it, you actually give permission to other people to talk about it, and suddenly you realize, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not actually alone, right? And then there's support groups. One of the things that we have in our community is Women on Wednesdays, right? Where we talk about all sorts of different mental health topics, for example. It's a large group. We come every week. It's such a warm and welcoming place to be. That's a resource right in the community. And you don't even have to say anything. You're just coming and learning and being around other people who are also looking to grow and learn and, have better wellness overall. There's also a couple of other resources in our community. So we have, for those who are looking for psychotherapy and can't afford it, because psychotherapy is expensive across the country. And so there is a psychotherapy subsidy available for those who qualify. And so that's something you can reach out and learn about through the Access line. And then there's a couple of programs. So for those who are kind of like in that, yellow-orange phase of the continuum, that would be Living Life to the Full. And so that is a program that just helps you with overall tips and techniques on how to stay well, right? So you're yellow, but you want to get to green. Living Life to the Full, hands down, fantastic program. It's a lot of fun. It's really lighthearted. You work with a group of other people who are wanting to learn, and that's one resource within the community. And that's actually an external program through the Canadian Mental Health Association that we've brought into our community. And so that's one. The other, for those who are supporting people who have a mental illness or who are struggling with their mental health, there's Mental Health First Aid, which is a weekend training program for people to learn about what to do in a mental health emergency, right? Just like you take first aid, you would know what to do. We kind of know what to do when there's a first aid emergency. Also, there are mental health emergencies. And so if you want to learn about that, in our community as well. There's that is offered, and that's through the Mental Health Commission of Canada. So we've actually partnered in our community with these really these research-based organizations that have these incredible programs, and we're offering it at a fraction of the price to the community. So those are the resources internally. But like you said, that social support, that day-to-day social support is hands down the safety net for so many people. And a very simple thing, Alia, is something like texting someone, right? People used to text me when I was going through my thing and saying, checking in, how's your day going? And then I'd say, fine. And then they would text back, no, really, how's your day going? Right? Just that simple second time gave me permission to then actually have a real conversation about how I was doing. And so, we always say, oh, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? Like we're not actually saying, how are you? And if someone says to you, Alia, how are you? How are you doing? Right? Suddenly that opens a door and you can have a conversation, a real conversation. And, for the people who are the supporters, you might not know what to say. There might be nothing you can say because you can't fix it, right? That's the person's journey on their own. But what you can do is you can show up for them. You can be there with them.
Right.
A very long answer to a very short question,
No.
But hopefully that was helpful.
It was really very helpful. No, thank you. And there was, one thing in particular that really makes me think of during my time, what could have been really helpful was, I don't think my parents now, they understand it because of everything I went through and, they tried being there, but they didn't necessarily understand it all the way, I would say. So how, you touched on people can take mental health first aid, but it's like, how can you tell parents or people or other people how do you get the word out about mental health and what can they do? Is there anything in addition to mental health first aid that other people can equip themselves that if they get into a situation like this and what they can do? Because again, it's a very sensitive topic, like saying the right things, taking the right action with that person. Like what are some tips that other people can do to help people that are going through a tough time?
So the Canadian Mental Health Association that we've partnered with for Living Life to the Full, their websites have brochures, information brochures. And so if you go to their websites or the Mood Disorders Association, Mental Health Commission, they have these pamphlets that you can actually read to show you like what are the signs and the symptoms and how to know if, right? And so if you just Google like, am I depressed? You're going to get all sorts of stuff. And so I would say go to these credible places and start learning about what does it look like? What does schizophrenia look like? What does an eating disorder look like? What does depression look like, right? Because like you were saying, Alia, you don't necessarily know when it's happening to you and you're not a mental health I'm a mental health professional. I didn't even know what was happening when it was happening to me. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And so I actually went and like read it and I know what depression looks like in other people, but in me, like I'm this high achiever and like, how is this happening? So educate yourself. Talk to other people who have had lived experience with whatever the struggle is that the person, that you love is facing, and don't be afraid to talk about it. So one of the things we know in the research is actually using the words depression, bulimia, suicide, actually using these words with somebody who is struggling frees them. It frees them to have an honest conversation with you. If we tiptoe around and we're not quite sure.
Yeah.
And you can even say, I don't want to say the wrong thing and I'm sorry if I'm clumsy. You can say that, right? But don't shy away from having the conversation because you don't want to offend anyone or say the wrong thing. Just try and they'll be happy that at least you've reached out and at least somebody noticed, right? Somebody noticed that I was struggling. That's the main thing.
And just to know that someone like cares for us and everything. And, you had touched on that you were like overachieving and, the signs like that with some people, you don't even know what they could be going through. And that to me is one of the scarier things now, that it could be anybody around you and there might not be any signs at all, Dr. Saira. I think that's the stuff that keeps you up at night, that friends, family, whoever. And it's like people you would never imagine harm themselves or going through a tough time and you would never know. And I know this is such a big question that's bigger than you and I, but it's like, what can we do in situations like that? And I don't like to talk about it and to be there for our friends, but I think could you maybe share a little bit on that? It's like people that you wouldn't even think were going through anything, or people that say, I don't have a problem, Alia, I'm okay. I don't need any help. I do not need any therapy. I do not need any support. I'm fine. And as people around them, you're worried for them. What do you do then? Like, how do you help people who don't want to be helped?
So I think there's two questions there, right? One is the question of how do I help? How do I know if somebody needs help? And then the second question is, how do I help somebody who doesn't want to be helped or doesn't, want to take a next step? So I will address the first question first, which is, how do we help the people who how do you even know? How do you even know if somebody needs help? And that's why I think being real is so important. When's the last time we actually asked somebody, looked into their eyes, even if it's on Zoom, and asked them, how are you doing, right? So I think that really having meaningful conversations helps the people who are trying to hide it. It gives them a space to say, we're okay if you're not okay. It's okay. We're here with you, even if you're not okay. So that's the first thing, is to talk to everybody with care and concern and kindness. That's the first one. And if one of the reasons people don't talk is because of the stigma and the judgment and the gossip and all of those things that happen in communities, right? And so we have to be really mindful. A concept that I love is what the concept of the vault, right? And what the concept of the vault is that there's some stories that are not yours to share. Right? So if somebody's confided something in you, that's not your story to share without their permission, right? And that's how we make it safer to talk to each other. And then if somebody's confided in you that they're suicidal, well, that's a story that you need to share to get that person the help that they need, right? So just being really thoughtful about your vault and how you address that. Now, your other question about people who don't want to seek help, there's not much you can do, to be honest. All you can do is continue to show up for them, continue to be there for them, because I know with myself, and maybe with you as well, it took me a long time to admit to myself what was really going on, right? I thought I should be able to get busy and forget about it. I thought I should be able to think my way out of it or whatever, and I wasn't really accepting what was really going on. So until I accepted it and I accepted that I needed help, I didn't get help. So there's not really much you can do as far as forcing people. All you can do is have conversations so they know that, when the time comes, you're ready to support them if and when they need that support. You can't force, just like you can't force a diabetic to take their insulin, you cannot force a person with anxiety to seek help for that anxiety. You just can't.
So I think the last thing, Dr. Saira, that I, wanted to ask, you went over resources, you went over like signs to look for, what we can do, what our families can do. How can we give people hope that they're going to be okay? And how can we do that and come together as the Jamaat, that, we have each other? And sometimes when we think it's people are talking or things are going on, like, just as human to human, a smiley to smiley, how do we give people hope that we're going to be there for each other? Maybe we might not have been there before, but how can we assure, like, I want to believe you'll be there for me, and I hope you believe me that I'll be there for you. How do we give people hope now going forward in our Jamaat that, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay together.
Well, Ali, I think we're doing that right now, right? It's one conversation at a time, one committed friend at a time, one honest, deep, heartfelt, moment like we're having right now at a time. And these are not easy conversations, like I said earlier, they're not, but to be willing to have them, I think that's the hope, is that we are willing to now finally, after how many years, have this conversation. And so hopefully you and I are giving people hope that this is possible, and that there are resources, and that they don't have to suffer alone, and that for family members, if you're worried about your loved ones, there's help available for you as well. Another resource I forgot to mention, besides psychotherapy and the doctor, your family doc, is support groups. There's so many support groups out there of other people who actually get it because they've experienced it. And for somebody who's struggling and feels all alone, support groups can be profound. And that's why I mentioned, Women on Wednesdays. There's other things that are going on all the time through IA Canada. So just reach out and know that you're not alone. And hopefully this conversation has given you some hope.
I feel so much better even just talking to you at the end of this. And, if not a Dr. Syra, I hope in a friend and someone. And, I thank you so much for sharing your experience too, right? So that to me is already so profound. So I thank you so much for your resources, taking the time. And I'm hopeful too that we're all in this together, and we're all going to get each other through this as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Syra. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Alia.
I was a very happy-go-lucky type of person. I was a social butterfly. I used to love to dance. I could do anything. I was, if I set my mind to it, I would do it. Just shortly after I lost my job, and it kind of broke me. Life was challenging as it is because of other things that were happening in my life. But this particular time, I felt defeated. And what I mean by that is waking up was a challenge, doing things was a challenge, talking to my family, which is the biggest part of my life, was a challenge. And shamefully, was even going for a shower. I just didn't have the energy. I just didn't want to do anything.
I think how I viewed myself was the biggest change that I noticed, and how people kind of interacted with me. So I was really self-destructive, and that put people that were very close to me kind of at a scare. So, and then that would in return scare me.
I would say I was in Switzerland when I first really realized what a depression was about, right? And I'd gone there from England. I'd been very socially very successful, so to speak, in England. Had good success in the career that I took.
So I went to see a psychiatrist who told me right away, she's like, oh no, you need medication. I'm like, I'm not gonna have medication. I'm anti-meds. I want to try and do things to get through things. So I went for counseling, private counseling. I did group counseling. I listened to music, meditation music. I thought maybe something will calm me down, something, And to be honest, it took me a year after doing all that therapy. I did cognitive therapy to see what's going on. Like, is there something deeper than this? Finally, I knew that something was staying with me too long. Feelings weren't changing. My energy wasn't changing. So I went back to the psychiatrist and I said, okay, I need help. I can't do this. I can't shake this feeling. I can't, the sadness is just very overwhelming. I need help.
There was many times where I was almost hospitalized. Doctors and stuff would always tell me, especially because I was using recreational drugs to try and cope. A lot of doctors said that I would never make it past grade 12 with the amount of, self-coping mechanisms I thought I could use. Like, I was heavily into a lot of bad things, and I think being able to say that I graduated with honors as a valedictorian, and I went to university, and I did all those things, and I never really thought like I could. Just because when you're in a state of being in a rut and you feel like your life should be better than what it is, you never really see the beauty that it can become.
A lot of exercise, I find walking by the water helps a lot. Walking in greenery helps a lot. Avoiding negativity, basically, right? Keeping good company, Yeah, there are the people who might be going through depression or whatever around me, or going through hard times, but is looking at teaching myself and teaching them to look at the glass as half full.
I just think that people need to recognize that this is a real illness. We don't want to be sick. We don't want, who wants to be sick? It's an illness. People may think it's not a real illness, but truly it is.
The hardest thing I struggled with was because it wasn't a visible illness. I look and I act. I am a normal person, you talk to me, you can't see that there's anything wrong. It's more in my head and in my heart that that is what I struggle with. It's a scary thing to talk about, and I feel like if more people just talked about it, it would clear the air, right? It starts with one person.
But again, there's a stigma. Again, like I found, is what's wrong with this person? Why can't they get out of it? So there's not enough education out there. Don't start judging, start understanding, educate yourself on what's going on.
I think my biggest fear is, and it always has been, it's how is it going to, if I tell somebody, how is it going to affect my sisters, for example, because they know a lot of people in our community. I don't tell people when I used to work. Frankly, it's not anybody's business, but I think it's a lot of fear.
If I talked about this 10 years ago, I think it would be a little bit more taboo, but it's nice to see that there are people in the Jamaat that are wanting to talk about this, that are wanting to show support and wanting to build resources so that individuals like me or individuals with, more clinical mental illnesses are supported, even if they don't understand. Like it's beautiful to see that we're slowly progressing in that direction, and I really hope that my nieces and nephew and my future children, like they have that support, because it's something that is needed for sure.
تشکر برای این مکالمه زیبا که انجام دادید. آسان است که دوباره به دانستن این فکر کنیم که ما تنها نیستیم، اما گاهی اوقات دشوار است که این را احساس کنیم، و خصوص زمانی که جسماً از همدیگر دور هستیم. برای کمک به یادآوری ما پیام‌های مکی صاحب، کامریا صاحب، مکیانی صاحبه و کامریان صاحبه را داشتیم که از نقاط مختلف کانادا نمایندگی می کنند.
You are not alone.
तुम्हें एकला नहीं.
You are not alone.
شما تنها نیستید.
You are not alone.
I कोई एकला नहीं हूँ.
Vous n'êtes pas seul. We are here for you.
हमें तुम्हारा माटे चाहिए.
We are here for you.
ما به خدمت شما قرار داریم.
We are here for you.
आंजे वास्ते असा हिदा जो जायो.
Nous sommes présents pour vous.
We can get through this together.
My brothers and sisters, please know that we are always here for you. On behalf of all the Jamaati Mukhi Kamriya and Mukyani Kamriyanis across the country, we offer you our unconditional support and our unconditional love. Our hope is that there be no one who feels alone or isolated when facing challenges, when worried about a loved one, or who just needs an ear to listen. While we may not be able to see you in Jamaat Khana, we are always here and are a phone call away. If you're unable to contact your Mukhi Sahib, Kamriya Sahib, Mukyani Sahiba or Kamriya Sahiba directly, please reach out through the access line. We pray for Mushkil Asan, for peace, for fulfillment, for unity, for good health and for happiness. Ameen.
تشکر مکی صاحبان، کامریا صاحبان از تمام نقاط کانادا برای اطمینان این که جماعت شانه‌ای برای تکیه کردن دارند. حالا مثل همیشه ما برنامه را با بعضی از پارچه‌های موسیقی به پایان می‌رسانیم. سپاس و تشکر از این که این هفته با ما پیوستید. من امیدوارم که شما آخر هفته فوق‌العاده داشته باشید. سالم و صحتمند بمانید و مراقب همدیگر باشید.
Sometimes in life the dark appears, even when the sun's out shining so bright. You need a sign for the clouds to clear. Just take a moment and search for the light.
बारिश के बाद धूप है, अंधेरे के बाद
जलती रहे इस दिल की शमा क्यों है खफा तू मायूस सा क्यों है उसे याद कर Just close your eyes and let your heart say that name then you know you're not उम्मीद पे ये जहां कायम है No you're not क्यों सोचता तू खुद को अकेला जब वो तेरी रूह से वाबस्ता बारिश के बाद है गुज़ार अंधेरे के बाद उजाला With folded hands we will rise above come one day क्यों है खफा तू मायूस सा क्यों है उसे याद कर Just close your eyes and let your heart say that name then you know you're not उम्मीद पे ये जहां कायम है No you're And when you call his name with joy or in pain, he'll be by your side, your strength to survive. जब तू मेरा है, क्या करेगा ये अंधेरा? Gummin, sayajali bi walayat khayali. Gummin wa gummin, sayajali bi walayat khayali. उम्मीद पे ये जहां कायम है No you're
Nade Ali, Nade Ali, Nade Ali, Nade Ali and Masr al-Ajaya, Lajida, Aunan, Gafin Nabaya, Kullu, Amin wa Gamin, Sayan Jali bi Walayatika, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali.